Michusay Chashavos Amalku V'chaynu ritzlikru V'say V'yichalnu nesichu Levish bigdai chamidois Lehadlik nair v'vruchu Vat eichel kol v'avoidois Loisasi meluchu Lisanai v'samigim barbirim Islav dugim Yerev mazminim kol minay matamim mi boyd yoy mi khunim tanikoy lefitubumim velar boy kamominim shoy saynes mi visumim safnikay madamim khol shuloy shpiyumim lisanag besani gimbar birim islav dugim Yakoy yirosh bilim tzurim nachloy vi khavdi yoshivorash vesizikil gilu ay ay mishabos itishmo moydi oy vi yisem lisegi Shes yomim tavoydi ivashvino gilu lehisanay besanigim barbirim islave dugim chafetzechu yaseyirim higam lach shoy cheshboinois hirim yigiturim ile shaday Lamdoy Seifer Tam Natsayach bin Ginois Pelagos Ve'im Raishe Yifer Bechol Binois Imach Nois Ve'yisanay Ve'sanigim Barbirim Islov Bedugim Shaynu mishivachas kados nefesh mishivas v'chayin v'chayin avav shiyoy lechu veluniach v'chibas kal sheshamim sigigu moyunich yibayni yivas lehisanay besanigim barbirim islave dugim ayay noy lomavu yoy shavos menichu kol amisangim bo yizkireroy simchu my hevelay mushigi yachdi tzuli lirvuchu edesay nisatz mikigi yach vehenos yogoy lanuchu leyisanay besanigim barbirim islav dugim
Shalom, my dear friends. Shalom. Today, the third day of the month of Adar of the year 5777, the 1st of March of the year 2017. Here we are advancing in the northern hemisphere into the spring with Israel, with green and blossoms, with the latter rains now falling gently on the land. And with thanks to God today, I'm very happy to announce to you that during last night, my dear middle daughter Fega gave birth to a baby boy in the holy city of Tzfat in the Galilee. So that's a very great family joy for us. And that is going to affect slightly our program for next week. We will, with the help of God, be having Kollel studies on Sunday and Monday. However, with the hope, God willing, that the baby will be well to have his circumcision on next Wednesday to their week, we will, my wife and I will need to travel to the north on Tuesday, and I will not be available for teaching on Wednesday and Thursday of next week, and there will actually be therefore a break until after Purim, and I will notify everybody about the exact dates. We will, God willing, have studies tomorrow and on this coming Sunday and Monday, as I have said to you. So with that, my dear friends, let us go into our studies for today of the book of Iyov, coming now into chapter 12 of Iyov. Shalom. Today, the 3rd of Adar of the year 5777, corresponding to the 1st of March of the year 2017. And we continue now with our studies in the book of Job, Sefer Iyov, starting in chapter 12, in which Job launches into a lengthy response to the third of his three companions, Tzofar HaNaamati, whose address to Job we heard in the previous chapter, and the response of Job to Tzofar and to the companions, which is the last of the first cycle of speeches between the four of them. This response of Job stretches over chapter 12, chapter 13, and chapter 14 before Eliphaz, the first of the three companions, will enter into the second cycle of speeches. And that will go round the three of the companions, with Job answering each time, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Tzofar. And there will be a third cycle where Eliphaz and Bildad address Job, but so far not so far anymore, because he has no more to say to Job, and Job launches into his final, very lengthy oration, and then the companions have nothing more to say, and that is when Elihu bar Barachel will step into the discussion. Well, for the moment, let us focus on this response of Job to Tzofar, where, as we see already, the first cycle of the addresses of the companions to Job is now at its conclusion. And we see that already there is a very great gap between Job himself and where he is at, and the way he is looking at things in his dire affliction, as between the three companions. And even now, as we shall see in the beginning of chapter 12, he turns this against them, that how can they possibly, in their affluence and their success and their time of prosperity, how can they possibly, first of all, expect that they will get off innocent, and just like the wicked, they say, who prosper, who will eventually fall, so too this will occur to them, says Job. In the first, our present chapter, chapter 12, he is going to to explain that he himself knows no less than they do about the greatness of God. And we see some of the most beautiful, flighty passages in this chapter and in the two coming chapters about the in our Tanakh. So in this chapter, he's going to talk more about the greatness of God, and in the following chapter, he's going to talk about how well he understands the destruction of the wicked. And in the third of these three chapters, chapter 14, he will come to a most beautiful section about the nature of human life. So with that, let us go into the Hebrew text of our chapter, Iyov chapter 12, beginning at the first verse. Vaya'an Iyov vayomar. And Job answered, and he said, Omnom ki atem om, va'imechem tomus chochmo. This is somewhat sarcastic. Now that all three of the companions have spoken, he says, Omnam, indeed, true, ki atem om, you are a people, you are a group, a majority. Ve'imochem tomus chochmo. Is it that with you shall die all wisdom? There's no more wisdom. You are the monopoly holders on wisdom. This could be considered as a rhetorical question or also as a sarcastic. So, of course, you being so wise, wisdom will die when you do. He says, no, that's not so. Verse 3, Gamli leivov komochem, lo neufel anoichi mekem, v'es mi ein kamo eile. Gamli leivov, to me too is a heart, komochem, just like you. A heart that may be filled with wisdom. Lo neufel anoichi mekem. I'm not fallen down deeper any more than you. Ve'es mi ein kamo eile. Well, this is a phrase that is somewhat difficult to find a totally satisfying pshat to establish exactly what the words are saying. The simple meaning is Ve'esmi, with whom ein is not kamo eile, like these. So Rashi's commentary here is that the Holy One, blessed be He, is in control to do His will and to extend the tranquility of the wicked. And he's going on to argue, you are doing nothing more than mocking at me. And I have become the one that is a matter of laughter, of mockery to his friend. Well, now, the interpretation of the Metzudat David of these words, he says, Ve'es mi ein kamo eile. He says, es mi, ve'im mi, with whom from the people that do not have a heart that can understand the way that these companions do. This seems to me to be a more easily comprehensible pshat here, that he's saying, I'm no worse than you, and with everybody else in the world also, with who else is not the same wisdom and understanding that they have already expressed. In other words, he's not denying the truth of what they have said, but he says that their wisdom simply does not stretch far enough, and because they cannot comprehend him, they are now putting themselves into a very serious position. He says, Schok l're'ehu ehyeh. Object of mockery, of scorn to his friend, have I become. Ehyeh, the future form of the verb, is indicating that this is something that is continuously keeping on happening. I've become and I'm going to be a mockery to my friends. Koireh le'eloah v'ya'anehu. He calls out to God and God answers him. Sechok tzadik tomim. An object of mockery is the pure, righteous tzaddik. Well, who is calling out to God that is getting answered is explained differently between Rashi and the Metzudat David. Rashi says that this he's calling out to God and he will answer him. This is warning his friends that Job, who is the object of their mockery, has become the object of their mockery, will in fact, as the afflicted and persecuted, call to God and be answered in the end. In other words, if they now are riding high in their time of success, health, and prosperity, but God will eventually answer him according to the rules that the three of them have laid down, that the wicked eventually pay their penalty. And the reason being, Schok Tzadik Tamim, that they have made as an object of mockery the pure tzaddik. The Metzudat David explains it very slightly differently, though it eventually comes down to the same thing. He says the person who's calling out to God, that God answers him, is these are the companions who right now, it seems, through their success and their tranquility, they are the ones who are being answered by God, whereas Job is here in this abject misery and is not getting answered. And so that is the implicit warning to the companions that you have put yourselves, through your inability to understand my predicament and my question, you've put yourselves into the very bad position of people who are in their prosperity mocking the righteous, and they themselves are wicked and will eventually get their requites. Verse 5, Lapid buz la'ashtus sha'anon, nochon lemo'adei rogel. Here Job himself begins to speak about the wicked that are riding high, but that will be brought down through God's vengeance. And this will continue in the following verses with some very interesting passages in the Targum, bringing out allusions that contain under the Hebrew text. In verse 5 then, lapid buz, a lapid is a burning torch, but here it's a burning torch of booze, of an expression of disparagement and contempt. So a firebrands of contempt will come to the le'ashtus sha'anon. Ashtus is a very unusual word. A better known form of this root is eshtenotav, his thoughts. And here this comes to the same thing, the thoughts of the sha'anan, the thoughts of the serene and tranquil. There will come, if these people who are serene and tranquil, where they have their thoughts, lapid buz, there will be a firebrand of contempt cast upon them. Says Rashi, the fire of Gehenna stands to be cast down on the one who says that, the one who's tranquil and serene in his thoughts and says that he will have peace. Nochon lemoy adei rogel. Nochon, that is to say, this ashtos buz, this Ashtos Sha'anan, this person with their thoughts and their state of tranquility, that person is Nachon. He is standing there ready le'mo'adei rogel. Le'mo'adei rogel, to those who are quaking in their feet, who are unsure of their steps, who are unbalanced. They're slipping and they're going to fall. So this could go one of two ways: either on those people themselves who will eventually slip and fall, or that if they are laughing at the weak who are suffering, then those are the weak people who are stumbling on their feet, and the firebrands of contempt will come upon the person that harbors his thoughts against these poor people. I think it's fair to point out at this point in our text that on one level, Job is a person who is racked with illness and torment and suffering himself. But he is also a spokesman for the millions and millions that have faced throughout history and continue to face untold horrors from war, from injury, from violence, from robbery, from persecution, from oppression, from imprisonment, all kinds of people who do suffer apparently a meaningless suffering and for no evil that they committed. And as we read Job's words and follow through the thread of his orations, let us bear in mind that he is indeed not just a single person suffering, and that would be enough in itself to evoke our sympathy, but that he really is indeed speaking for the multitudes that have suffered and continue to suffer in one way or another. And now he's going to speak about the success of the wicked, the apparent success of the wicked. And let us first look at the simple meaning of the Hebrew before looking at the Aramaic Targum, what it says about an explanation of the coming verses. Yishloyu oholim leshodedim uvatuchois lemargizei el la'asher hevi Eloah beyodo. Yishloyu, again an expression of shalva, of tranquility. It's a verb here. Yishloyu, they shall be tranquil, apparently, and outwardly, the ohalim, the tents, leshodedim, of the robbers, the violent robbers. Uvatuchois, things that are assured and seem possible to trust and depend upon, are given lemargizei el, to those who anger, to infuriate God. La'asher, to the one who hevi Eloha biodo, to the one who God has brought in his hand. So let us look now at the Aramaic Targum of Yonatan on this verse. On chapter 12, verse 6, Yishloyu oholim leshodedim uvatuchois lemargizei el. Says the Targum here, Uvenei Esov the Shelavin, the children of Esau, that is Edom, who are tranquil. B'mashkenehoin yismasrun levazoizin. In their dwelling places shall they be handed over to people who will sack them of their wealth and possessions. It sounds like the immigrants today who are swarming all over and destroying the Western civilization. So that's the children of Edom. And now Uvenei Ishmael, This is the translation of the phrase, the Targum on Margizel, those who infuriate God. V'nei Ishmael d'rechitzin, those children of Ishmael that are trusting. Yismasrin l'she'or umayo. They will be handed over to the other peoples, the Margizin Eloho, the other peoples that are enraging God. The Chemosahoin, the Zamin Eloho B'yedei. For it shall be those like them that God shall prepare to give over these enragers of God into their hands. This is the first Targum. A second Targum on the same verse, V'nei Yishmael, it reverses the order. V'nei Yishmael, the Shlevin, the children of Ishmael that are Shlevin, that are tranquil, B'mashkenehoin Ismasrun Levoizozin, in their dwelling places shall they be handed over to those that will plunder them. Va'amonoe u'mo'avoi, the Ammonites and the Moabites. Deshorion lerochtzon, that are dwelling in a state of security. Yismasrun beyad reshiayo, demargazin Eloah. They will be handed over into the hands of the wicked that enrage God. Hich Paro, just like Pharaoh, the Aisi Eloah Aloi Machaso B'yedei, that God brought upon him plagues in his hand. So, with after this verse, the Targums become a little more directly staying with the text, but our Targum here on this verse, and let's bear in mind that our sages said that the Targum of Yonatan ben Uziel on our Tanakh was divinely inspired. So the Targum is bringing out the allusions contained in these verses, that it may seem that the tents of the plunderers of whichever nation they are in a state of tranquility, and that there is a state of trust for those who enrage God. To those that enrage God, these people shall be entrusted into their hands. So Job is saying, yes, that is what the companions have been telling him, that the wicked will have their downfall, and we see this in its historical proofs. He says, but there's another dimension to this, that you are simply not, your wisdom does not express. He says in verse 7, Ve'ulam sha'alno ve'hemois ve'soireko ve'of hashomayim ve'yagedloch. But sha'alno, please ask, ve'hemois, either the plural of behema, namely the animals. The soireko would appear to be a singular form of the verb. If it were plural, it would be yoirucho. Here it's soirecho, which is the third person feminine form of the root of hora'ah, to teach and to explain. So for that reason, either it's referring to each and every animal. If you ask each and every one, she will teach you, or it could also possibly be an allusion to the behemoth creature that is introduced at the end of the book, and here perhaps alluded to. Go to the behemoth, and this monster creature, she shall teach you. Ve'of hashomayim ve'yagedloch, the birds of the heavens, they shall tell you. Osiach lo'oretz v'soireko v'yisapru lecho degei hayom. Or if there were a mouth to give expression to the words of the earth, siach, talk, expression, if there were siach also is the Hebrew word for the herbs of the field, siach hasodeh. But here I think it's saying if there was speech to the earth, v'toreko, she would teach you. V'yisapru lecho, they would narrate to you degei hayom, the fish of the sea. Mi lo yoda b'chol eile, ki yad Adonai oseso zois. Who does not know among all of these that the hand of Hashem has done this in all of those cases of the downfall of the wicked, both past and future? Who does not know that this is the hand of Hashem? And here, unusually in the book, here it is Job who mentions the divine name, the Shem Ha'etzem, the Tetragrammaton, whereas previously, as we've seen, and Job himself in this speech has spoken about Elohah and Shaddai, but here we have the divine name in itself, God presiding over the entire creation. Of course, we know that God brings down the wicked. And he will continue in the same vein in the continuation of this chapter, Asher biyodo nefesh kol choy v'ruach kol besar ish, that in his hand is the soul of all living and the spirit of all the flesh of men. A verse familiar to us from our Siddur, the praises of the Psukei de Zimra, the Shabbat. Halo ozen milin tivchon v'hech ochel yit'amlo. Surely the ear, halo ozen, is it not that the ear, milin tivchon, milin words, tivchon, examine, the ear shall examine the words. V'chech, the palate, ochel yit'amlo, to the palate, ochel, food, yit'amlo, the palate shall taste for himself the food. These expressions here speaking not only about the physical ear hearing, but the inner ear of understanding, examining and scrutinizing what is said, and the person that is seeking to eat the feast of wisdom will find the taste to be right or not. And Job is indicating here that what he's heard from his companions is not sufficient. Verse 12, B'yeshishim chochmo, v'oirech yomim tevuno. B'yeshishim chochmo, Yeshish is an old person. In the old is to be found wisdom. V'oirech yomim tevuno. Length of days brings understanding. Not in all cases, but among those who pursue wisdom, the wisdom resides in the elders, and Job here is indicating that he is certainly the senior of Tzofar, and therefore what he has to say is quite valid. And the reason being, everybody knows, the old sages know, who have wisdom, who have understanding, Imoy chochma ugevuro, loy eitza usevuno. With him, with God, is wisdom and strength. To him are counsel and understanding. And now we will hear about the power of God to overturn the arrogant and to frustrate the plans of the crafty. Hein yaharos v'lo yiboneh, yiskor al ish v'lo yiposeach. Verse 14, Hein yaharos, indeed, if God will destroy, v'lo yiboneh, the place will not be able to be built. Yiskor al ish, if he will close in on a person, V'lo yiposeach, the person will not be opened up, will not be released. Now, a very beautiful verse, verse 16. Hein ya'atzor b'mayim v'yivoshu v'yishalchim v'yafchu oretz. Hein ya'atzor b'mayim. Indeed, see how God has the power to hold back the water, the yivoshu, and they dry up. The waters dry up. Vayishalchem, and when He sends the waters forth, vayahafchu oretz, they overturn the world, the tsunami, the tidal wave that engulfs a country. So He did in it says Rashi, so God did in the generation of Enosh, when He flooded 1/3 of the world. That is said by the Midrash to be the Mediterranean basin that was once inhabited. So all continuing with the great praises of God of Job, and he's saying this is no secret. Anybody that is wise knows what you have said so far. Verse 16, Imo oz besushio Loi shoigeg umashke. Imoi, with Him, with God, are oz, strength, the ultimate strength. Besushio, the true wisdom. The word tushia comes from the root yesh. Once the Torah exists, it will never ever be nullified. And tushia is the abstract noun that comes from this sound, eternal wisdom of the Torah. So God has the wisdom, He has the strength. Loi shogeg, to Him, to God, are both the shogeg, the person that errs without intention, umashke, the person that causes another to err. He leads people astray. He goes astray intentionally. So God knows everything, knows the situation of each and every one. Verse 17, Molich yoatzim sholol v'shoftim yeholel. Molich, He leads the yoatzim, the counselors, sholal, wild. To go wild in Hebrew today is lehishtolel, the hitpael form of sholal, to swerve seriously into unbalanced insanity. Even the yoatzim, the wise counselors, God can lead them just to a situation of madness. For shoftim yeholel, the judges, the people that should be miushav with yishuv hadat, with calm, clear vision, He can also yeholel, throw them into complete confusion and madness. Musar melochim piteach vayesor ezor b'mosnehem. Verse 18, the two aspects of temporal earthly kings, God installs them and God can take them down. Musar melochim piteach. He takes them down. Musar melochim, the binding up of the kings, God opens up. When they bind the belt of strength, He can open it up and take them down. V'esor ezor b'mosnehem. And it is He who binds the belt around their loins. God takes down, God brings up. Moilich kohanim sholol ve'isonim yisalif. Molich Kohanim, God leads the Kohanim here, not in the sense of the priests of the temple, but here the word Kohen is used in the sense of a ruler, as in the case of Jethro, Yitro, who in Exodus is described as the Kohen Midian. He was the leader of, or one of the leaders of Midian, and in those days the leaders did indeed participate in the cults and services to whoever they prayed to. But here it is the leaders, the men of power, that God can lead sholal, again in the same sense we had it earlier in the previous verse of wildly astray. Ve'isonim yisalif, the Isanim, those who are strong and seemingly eternally solid, Yisalef, God has the power to change it all around. The expression of Yisalef is one of turning it into something that becomes false, something that is just not acceptable. Meisir sofo lene'emonim v'tam zekenim yikoch. Meisir sofo, God may turn aside the lip to the ne'emanim, to the faithful. V'tam zekenim, the taste, the inner taste of the mind and the consciousness of the elders, God may take away. In other words, there is no guarantee for any human. Shofech buz al nedivim u'meziach afikim ripo. Shofech buz, he pours down scorn al nedivin, over those generous, great philanthropic lovers of something, the nobles, those that he is going to cast down for their sins. U'meziach afikim ripo, meziach, an expression of strength, and afikim also one of strength. The meziach, the power of the afikim, of the strong, ripo, from the root rofo, here the PL form of the verb, ripo, he causes to weaken. Megale amukos mini choshech. He reveals deep things out of the darkness. Vayotze lo'or tzalmoves. He brings forth to the light the very shadow of death. Maski lagoyim vayabdim, shoteach lagoyim vayancheim. Maski, from the concept of sagi, very high, very exalted. It makes high the nations, the peoples, vayabden, only to destroy them. Shoteach lagoyim vayancheim. So Rashi on this verse 23 tells us that this is as God did to Egypt. He says in the name of Yesh Omrim. One opinion is that this is as God did to Egypt when they were catching up with Israel, when Israel were encamped before Baal Zephon in Exodus 14 verse 2. And they made a mistake, and they thought that God agreed with them to drown Israel in the sea, just like we decreed against every male child that we born should be thrown into the river. And they believed at that moment there before the idol of Baal Zephon that their idol was very great. And because they had not yet seen on the night of the death of the firstborn that idol had been cast down like all the other idols of Egypt. And it was God Almighty that caused them to make this mistake in order to drown the Egyptians. He says, but however, this explanation of this verse is not, in Rashi's eyes, the best explanation. For if so, the verse should have said, to the side of the right, it should have been mashki. Mashki, instead of being maski, it should have said mashki with a shin. Mashki would mean to make a person go out of their mind, to make them shogeh. So the real meaning here, he says, is that God lifted up the nations and gave them apparent success, and their hearts become arrogant and inflated through their success, and that is actually their destruction, because that is what will, their very success is their destruction. And he says that Shoteach lagoyim bayanachem, he spreads out the nations and leads them all over the world, only eventually to cover them over. Verse 24, Meisir leiv roshei am ha'oretz vayas'ema b'soihu lo dorech. Meisir leiv, he turns aside the heart of the roshei am ha'oretz, the heads of the people of the land. Vayas'ema b'soihu lo dorech, he makes them go astray in tohu, in desolation, which in a place that is not any kind of road or pathway. Yemasheshu choshech v'lo or v'yas'em kashikor. Yemasheshu choshech v'lo or. Yemasheshu, they go around feeling their way in darkness and not light. V'yas'em kashikor, he deceives them like a drunkard. So this is the wisdom of seeing the destruction of the wicked by God that Job says everybody knows. As he goes on to say in chapter 13, Hen kol ru'aso ha'ini, shama ozni v'toven lo. All of this my eye has seen, my ear has heard, and I understand this. I know all of this, yes, but you've not answered the essential question, which he will go on to express in the coming chapter 13. So with that, my friends, we conclude now our studies of Tanakh for today, and we will take a short break, and after the break we will come back to our study of the Mishnah.
Kol beit
v'shiru lo kaila sher shabbos buru Ni yeshevach shevach v'shiru lo kaila sher shabbos buru Ni yeshevach shevach v'shiru lo kaila sher shabbos buru Ni yeshevach shevach v'shiru lo kaila sher shabbos buru Sheva Mashiach lo kaina vashem shabbos buru Ni Sheva Mashiach lo kaina vashem shabbos buru Ni Sheva Mashiach lo kaina sher shabbos buru Ni Sheva Mashiach lo kaina sher shabbos buru
Shalom, my dear friends, shalom, and back to our studies now in Avram's Tent Internet Kollel. And now we continue with our study in the Mishnah, continuing in chapter 6 with Mishnah 7. Shalom, today, the 3rd of Adar of the year 5777, corresponding to the 1st of March of the year 2017. And we continue our studies in Tractate Mishnah Masechet Mishnah Shabbat, Masechet Shabbat in Perek Vov, chapter 6. Continuing now with the 7th Mishnah, still dealing with the subject of what a person may go out into the public domain wearing besides their clothes. And here in Mishnah 7, the illustration shows the perufois, women that go out perufois, that is to say that their garment, the sides of their garments, their sari, their robe would be attached through the method of perifo. Let us read the Mishnah and then examine what is the concept of perifa. Perefes al ho'even. The woman may bind the sides of her garments together over a stone. She is inserting the stone inside the fabric of one side of the garment and tying around the stone a loop that is attached to the other side of the garment, and that's how she keeps that's her equivalent of the button. And she may do this in this manner, perefes al ho'even, over a stone, V'al ho'egos, or it could be over a nut. That could serve also the requisite purpose, a little pebble or a nut. V'al hamatbeya, and even with a coin. Now, with a coin, which could be used for this purpose and might be a quite available object for some to do this with, the Mishnah qualifies, ובלבד שלא תפרוף לכתחילו בשבos, on condition that she will not bind or attach in this manner the chatchila on the outset on the Shabbat. In other words, if she was not already wearing the garment attached in this way before the Shabbat, and this, according to our commentators, refers only to the coin, because a coin is actually muktzeh and is not to be handled on the Shabbat, being something associated with commerce and trade and so on. if she had designated this matbe'ah, this coin, to be the object on which she would be poirefes, on which she would do the binding, if she'd attached it before the Shabbos, then she could go out on the Shabbos, but she is not to take a coin on the Shabbat and use it in order to attach the sides of her garments. Now, moving on to Mishnah Chet. Our Mishnah speaks, and particularly Masechet Shabbat, about all aspects of life and every possible human contingency, and including here the laws of Shabbat for somebody who's lost the use of their foot. And Hakiteya, the person that had cut off his foot, Yotzei bakav shelo, he may go out with his kav. His kav, according to our commentators, is a false wooden shape of a foot that he uses not to walk on it, but he uses it more for aesthetic purposes in order to make it seem as though he has the foot that has actually been cut off. So this here is the meaning of the word kav, this kind of clog-like shape of a foot that the stump of his lower leg, actually, that is left after his foot had unfortunately been cut off, the stump will fit into the kav when he goes on the Shabbat. And the words of Rabbi Meir, the Kiteya, the person that has lost his foot, may go out with his kav, foot-shaped clog. Divrei Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Meir holds this is permissible. Rabbi Yoser Oiser, Rabbi Yoser forbids the Kiteya to go out with this. And the real question here is, what is the purpose of the kav? Is it possible for the person to go out without it? Is it, in either way, he's not going to be able, unfortunately, to walk on this truncated leg. So the kav is essentially serving an aesthetic purpose. And the question is it considered an ornament, or is it considered to be to be an object that is actually a masa, a burden, because it's there for aesthetic purposes, but not to actually decorate the person. The halacha is, in this case, like Rabbi Yosei, that it's forbidden. Ve'im yesh lo beis kibul ksusin tome. If this kav has base kibul ksusin, if it's got a base, that is to say a bias, a house, a cavity, a container for ksusin. Ksusin are ground down, whatever objects they are, they're to soften the impact on the stump of his leg on the sole of the kav foot-shaped object. Now, our Mishnah here is not talking about the laws of Shabbat, it's talking about the laws of Tumah and Tahorah, of purity and impurity. That if this person were observing the laws of purity, he would have to know that his kav, his foot, if it has a place for these kasusim, then it is considered a container. And in the laws of Tumah and Tahara, a wooden object that has a cavity that can contain something, if it's a bowl or a dish or any other wooden container, then the object is susceptible to receive impurity through contact with something that will defile it. And in this case, since it has a container of the ketutim, for that reason, the shoe is susceptible to tum'ah. However, the kav itself, without this base kibul ksusin, without the container for the cotton pads or whatever it is that are in there, since it has no container, it's not, because it receives the stump of the leg, that does not make it a container. And it is considered like peshute klei eitz, like simple wooden objects that have no cavity. And the reason being that it's not the kav, the shoe, that is carrying him, it is he that is carrying the shoe. Now the form of impurity here is actually impurity only from being defiled by something like a dead lizard or a dead mouse that would communicate tumas shrotzim or tumas nevela, the impurity of a piece of meat. But tumas zov, if the person were a zov, if he had a morbid flow from his genitals, or if he had some other form of tumah that causes what is called tumas midras, for those objects that the people in this category, the zov and the zova and the nida, all communicate this kind of impurity, this would not apply to the kav, because again, it does not come to support him. It's not like a chair or a bed that supports a zov or a nida. And therefore, when the Mishnah tells us that the im yesh lo bes kibul ksusin tameh, that if it has a cavity for these cotton pads or whatever, Tomei does not mean that it is intrinsically Tomei. It means that it would be susceptible to receive impurity if the kav shoe of the kiteya with his cropped off leg were to be defiled. So continuing now further with this rather difficult part of our Mishnah, talking about a person who is truly crippled and who does not have the power at all in his legs, and just to walk around on his knees and his shins. So he is the same kiteya, he has no feet, and nor evidently any kind of wheelchair, which is a different question on the Shabbat, but here we'll deal with our Mishnah. So his samochos shelo, these supports upon which he attaches to his shins and knees to support himself, they are tamei midros. These indeed do receive the tum'ah of midras. That is to say, if he were a zav or a nida, or if a nida or a zav came in touch with them, they would convey to them the defilement of zivus or nido. So the Mishnah is telling us what is the status of this auxiliary when it comes to the laws of purity and impurity. And the Mishnah says, "V'yotzin bohen b'Shabbos, v'nichnosin bohen b'Azoro." One may go out with them on the Shabbat. These are considered to be part of his essential need in order to get around outside on the Shabbat. It's like a walking stick, which is also permitted according to the Bartanura. A walking stick for a person who cannot walk without it would also be permitted to go out into the public domain with it on the Shabbat. But for people who have the question, should ask actually a posek how this applies in our times. But here the samochos, these supports probably of leather of the kiteya, the person with the amputated foot, these he could go out on the Shabbos with them. They're not considered to be a masa, not a burden. V'nichnosin bohem b'azoro, they may go with them into the azoro. The azoro is the central court of the temple. The Mishnah uses the term azoro here, the central courtyard, for the entire Temple Mount. Even if he were to go into the azoro on these, that would be permitted, even though we learn elsewhere in the Mishnah that to go into the Temple Mount wearing shoes is forbidden. These are not considered to be shoes. Well, now, another way that such a kitea might need to get around is with kisei v'samoichus shelo, on a chair with supports. That is to say, where he had no strength in his legs, if the lower leg had been amputated higher up than the foot, he might need to get around on a kisei, a support for his buttocks that we strapped to him, and when he wants to move, he would transfer his weight onto his two hands on the samoichos, on the supports, and he would swing his body forward, and then he would again lead forward and put his arms in front and put the weight on the arms, and that is how he would get around. So our Mishnah is now dealing with this case. Smochas shaloi t'mei midros. In this case, the smochos, those things that he has attached to his hands to put his weight on when he's swinging the body forward, those smochos, those supporters are t'mein midros. They are susceptible to the tum'ah of midras. Not to say again that they are tomei, but only if they come into contact with somebody who puts on the defilement of midras, the word midras meaning to step on something. If the nidor or the zov or the zovos step on these smochot, they're in the category of something that receives the defilement of tumas midros. V'yotzin bohen b'Shabbos, he may go out with them on the Shabbos. V'nichnosin bohem boazoro. I'm sorry, I've misread our Mishnah. The top two lines you see on the screen here would already said over, referring to the smochos of the first kitea. Namely the one that had them strapped to his lower legs. But now the second part of the Mishnah, kisei v'samochos, the chair and the samochos, the chair and his handrests, t'mein midros, they do have the category of receiving defilement of midras. Ve'ein yotzin bohen b'Shabbos. That was what I got wrong in my previous reading. I apologize. Ve'ein yotzin bohen b'Shabbos. He may not go out with them on the Shabbat. Ve'ein nichnosin bohem boazoro. They may not go with these into the temple courtyard, because these are considered in this person's case the equivalent of his shoes. And the fear is that if he were to go out with them on the Shabbat and he lost hold of one of the samochos, he might come to carry it in the public domain 4 cubits, which is forbidden on the Shabbat. So we now come to an interesting Mishnah dealing with a topic that is just rife for the month of Adar and coming up to Purim. Anekatamin tehorin ve'ein yotzin bohem. The comic masks, when it comes to the laws of purity and impurity, they are not considered to be susceptible to receiving defilement. And you can't go out with them on the Shabbat. They would be considered to be a masa, that is not a normal form of dress, such that nor is it an ornament to go out with on Shabbat. Another interpretation of the Ankatamin is that it's like the comic animal that 2 comedians will drape over themselves and walk around on stage or at the circus as if it was some kind of comic donkey. So the Ankatimon again is tahor, it's without not susceptible to get defiled. And Yotzim, they may not go out with them. Now a Mishnah Tes, the 9th Mishnah, a very interesting Mishnah here. Habonim Yotzin Bakshorim. The young boys may go out with kishorim, with knots tied on them. We shall see presently what these knots are. Uvenem lochim bezugin, and the children of the kings, the princes, may go out with zogin, with their little bells, jingle bells, jingling on their royal clothes. B'chol olam, indeed, every person may go out with such bells on the Shabbat. Need not be only a prince, it could also be a regular person. Except our sages spoke b'hoiva in the regular case, which would be the upper crust, the princes and aristocrats who might go out, but as we shall see in the very in our Mishnah, all of Israel are considered to be the sons of princes, and therefore the Mishnah is alluding to everybody who may, if one so chooses, to go out with a jingle bell attached to one's clothes. Well, again, ask your local Orthodox rabbi for the contemporary psak halacha on that one. But to go for a moment to the ksharim, the knots, the commentator Rabbi Ovadia of Bartanura tells us that a young boy that is really longs to be with his father all the time and can't bear to be separated, but sometimes he has to go off to school, or the father has to go wherever. So the father would take a strap of a right hand shoe, and he would attach it onto the left arm of his son. And all the time that knot is on the boy, the ga'aguim, the yearning that makes him cry and moan all day, will go away. That is a segula. And interestingly, the Bartanura writes that lahachik tane habonim, the reason why the Mishnah says habonim, the sons, she'en labonis ga'aguim alaviyin k'molabonim, because the girls don't have these ga'aguim, this tremendous, overwhelming longing for their father that the boys have. A very interesting commentary by the Rabbi Ovadia of Bartanura, who was chief rabbi of Jerusalem in the very early in the late 1500s and early 1600s. So now continuing with our Mishnah, now we get into some, again, very interesting issues bound up with what are called segulot. Already the binding of the ritzuah, the strap on the boy's right arm. And before we leave that, let me just say that the whole concept of the connection between the right hand shoe and the left arm seems to me very much bound up with the mystery of the tefillin of the arm on the left-hand side, as if the father is already binding the tefillin of the arm onto the boy to prepare him to be a mature adult. But that is called a segula, and so are the segulot, the treasures, the propitious methods of attaining cures. Yotzin beveitzas achargul. One may on the Shabbat go out from the private domain to the public domain wearing the beitzas achargul, the egg of a chargul, one of these species of kosher locusts that are mentioned in the Torah. This would be worn, the beitzas achargul, would be worn hanging on the neck of, hanging on the ear of a person who had an earache. Over Shen Shual, we could go out with the tooth of a fox. Masmir minat solov, with a nail from a person that had been saluv is the Hebrew word both for crucified and for hanging, for one that was hanged. And either way, a nail might be involved and could be used by a living person as a segula, propitious remedy for the swelling of a limb. We'll see in a moment what is the tooth of the fox. Mishum refu'ah, this is all for the sake of refu'ah, for the sake of healing, for a healing remedy. Divrei Rabbi Meir, these are the words of Rabbi Meir. B'chachomim omrim, the sages say, no, that's all superstition, not allowed. Af b'chol osur, even on a weekday, those things are forbidden to go around with. Mishum darchei ha'emori, because they are the superstitious ways of the Amorite, the ancient Canaanites, who were to be removed from the land of Israel to have Israel bring Torah in its place. So the Shena Shual, the fox's ear, the fox's tooth, the fox's tooth apparently, according to the commentators, has one of two attributes. If it's a person that has insomnia, they take the tooth of a dead fox so the person will become sleepy. Now, if it is a person that tends to oversleep and they need to wake him up, they would take the tooth of a living fox and hang it around his neck. The nail from the saluv would, according to our commentators, be applied to somebody that had a swelling on their body. And the Maimonides gives an alternative explanation. They'd be hanged around the neck of a person that was sick. According to Rambam, it will be the person that was sick with what he calls the third inflammation, the third fever. What the third fever would be, I do not know the correct interpretation. But with that, we conclude our studies of the Mishnah today. We conclude our study of Mishnah Vov, and in our next session we will come into the very interesting chapter of Mishnah of Perek Zion, the 7th chapter, dealing with the labors of Shabbat, the forbidden labors of Shabbat. So with that, my dear friends, we conclude today's studies, and I'll be back, God willing, tomorrow at the same time in all of our locations. So please do join me again tomorrow to continue with our studies. And I most certainly hope that by the before our break for Purim, which will be beginning after next Monday, we shall have gotten a good way into the next chapter of Shabbat, and that we shall also have got through the whole of Job's answer to Tzofar, and thus way we will come to a good stopping point in both of our studies to take us over the festival of Purim. With that, my dear friends, shalom from the holy city of Yerushalayim. Shalom, and I look forward to being with you again in our next session.
La 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 la, la 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 my da 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 bevias goyai bevias goyai lechaya